I believe we have to go on fighting terrorism as long as it takes.
The point that I would emphasize to you is that the threat from Saddam Hussein and weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, potentially nuclear weapons capability, that threat is real.
Can the region escape what is a poisonous politics when you turn religion into a political battle?
That was Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Sir Tony Blair is a British leader whose legacy is viewed from two contrasting perspectives. Some say his legacy was tarnished after he forced Britain to be a part of the US's Iraq invasion, while others laud him for his peace initiatives. But can his legacy be described in black and white? Or is there more that meets the eye? In this episode of HT In Depth, we examine Blair's role in shaping Middle East policies as he prepares to take on a possible administrative role in Gaza as part of Donald Trump's peace plan. Tony Blair could return to the Middle East very soon. His return depends on the success of US President Donald Trump's 20-point peace plan for Gaza. The plan envisages an international interim body that will be tasked with governing post-war Gaza. The Board of Peace would be chaired by Trump himself, while Blair will be a member. But how does the former UK Premier fit into this plan? To understand Blair's role, let's take a brief trip down memory lane. In 1997, Blair assumed the premiership of the United Kingdom, unbeknownst to what the role had in store for him. It began on a positive note when Blair successfully managed to usher in peace in Northern Ireland with the Good Friday Agreement. The Belfast deal was one of the pragmatic decisions in Blair's decade-long tenure. But then came the United States of America, on a warpath after the devastating 9/11 terror attacks. Then US President George W. Bush declared a war on terrorism. Initially, it was Al-Qaeda that was on America's radar, but then reports and intel soon claimed that Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein was harboring weapons of mass destruction. As the US invaded Iraq, the United Kingdom, led by Tony Blair, joined the war. The UK's involvement in Iraq greatly affected Blair's legacy and led to massive protests by citizens and diplomats alike.
I believe we have to go on fighting terrorism as long as it takes. Because what happened on the 11th of September was, of course, a brutal and horrific attack on America. But it was a demonstration of what these people are capable of in any part of the world.
We've all been trying to call for restraint and de-escalation, but the reality, I'm afraid, right now is that the situation is escalating and not de-escalating. The point that I would emphasize to you is that the threat from Saddam Hussein and weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, potentially nuclear weapons capability, that threat is real.
If we are right, as I believe with every fiber of instinct and conviction I have that we are, and we do not act, then we will have hesitated in the face of this menace when we should have given leadership. That is something history will not forgive.
An eventual independent inquiry into Blair's decision to back the US invasion showed he had exaggerated the case for war. The inquiry added there was no imminent threat from the Saddam regime. However, the investigation stopped short of calling the war illegal.
He joined George W. Bush in the war in Iraq without any evidence. I mean, he said there was evidence of nuclear weapons, weapons of mass destruction, and then it turned out there wasn't. So clearly there was an issue there. They also went to war without a United Nations Security Council backing. It was which was they sought it, they didn't get it, and then they went there. And look at where Iraq is at today. So clearly that's hanging over him. Yes.
With the advent of the Iraq War, Blair's popularity was on the wane. In 2007, Blair resigned as the Prime Minister, only to return as the Middle East envoy for the quartet. The quartet was made up of the United Nations, the European Union, Russia, and the United States. The group came into existence to facilitate the Israel-Palestine peace process. For the next 8 years, as the quartet envoy, Blair focused on helping the Palestinian economy and institutions. The former British premier's eventual goal was to negotiate a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine. However, he faltered, and peace talks eventually collapsed in 2015. The Americans, many Gulf nations, and Israel viewed Blair's involvement in the Middle East as positive, but the Palestinians viewed Blair with suspicion. Palestinians believe Blair favored the Israelis far too much.
Well, Blair was extremely ineffective for many years as the special envoy to the quartet, being the body that is the US, UN, EU and Russia that were meant to give a serious push to the peace process. And it was basically defunct after him, and I would say that even he was a colossal failure. So the problem is that unless this is a second chance for him to potentially redeem himself and do something good, but he really needs to be backed up by members of the board from the neighbouring states, Egypt and Jordan, and from the key Gulf states that have a stake in this, that namely Qatar, the UAE and Saudi Arabia.
Tony Blair stepped down as the quartet's envoy, going on to establish the Tony Blair Institute. This institute forms the basis of the current political scenario featuring Donald Trump, Gaza, and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. The Blair Institute prides itself on being a not-for-profit institution that serves as an advisor to governments, banks, and other similar clients. However, this institute is shrouded in controversy too. It has faced criticism for working with authoritarian governments. But in nearly a decade of its existence, the Institute has cultivated strong ties with Washington and states in the Middle East. The Institute, led by Blair, has been at the forefront of charting peace solution for Gaza. Blair's plan envisioned a post-war governing authority in Gaza called the Gaza International Transitional Authority. Initially, the plan only focused on running Gaza, but with Trump's return to office, it evolved into a means to end the war permanently. Some of the Blair Institute's plans have also triggered controversy. A Financial Times investigation found that some staff members from the Institute were involved in a study that backed the displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. The study was an echo of Trump's Riviera of the Middle East plans. The Institute was quick to rebuff the claims. Despite the clarification, Blair's association with the Trump family casts a shadow over his involvement in the Middle East. In August 2025, Blair met with Jared Kushner, Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff, to discuss the Gaza plan. But that was not the first time Kushner and Blair met to talk about the Middle East, particularly the Israel-Palestine conflict. Kushner, a real estate developer, and Blair go back several years to Trump's first presidential term when they discussed Washington's Middle East plan. The duo met at the US-backed Peace to Prosperity conference in Manama in 2019. Here's what they discussed.
The politics only works if the politics goes deep, right? If there's genuine cultural acceptance on both sides. If both sides can establish some sense of real trust in each other, and that stability, by the way, if you can achieve that, that stability then helps the economics. So this is the relationship I see between the two, and I think it's absolutely foolish to believe you can have economics without sound politics, but it's likewise completely futile to think politics will work without economics buttressing it. In the region, people realize that in the end, it's going to be up to them. You know, that their own destiny is in their own hands. When I take a step back and I look at this region, I think there are two big questions. Can you get to societies of religious tolerance? And can you get to rule-based economies? I mean, everything that is, you've heard from all the business people here today and yesterday is, can you establish predictable rules in which we can do business? But the other thing is, can the region escape what is a poisonous politics when you turn religion into a political battle. Because if you look around the world today, it's all about people being connected. Right? And your best connection today is when you're prepared to go across the boundaries of faith and culture and race and ethnicity and say, look, I'm open-minded to you. And that, to me, is what the struggle in this region is all about. So one of the things I'm pleased about with the plan is that you do focus a lot on Gaza. I think what happens in Gaza is a tragedy. I would like to see, before we get a long-term solution, I would like to see at least a short-term agreement where the violence can be halted, some stability is achieved, we get the reconstruction necessary going into Gaza, and then I believe it's very hard to have a peace agreement unless Palestinian politics is unified. But it's got to be unified on a basis that promotes peace.
The question that leadership has to ask themselves, what I just said, do they hate their neighbor in Israel more than they love their citizens and their people? And I think that that's a fundamental question that Hamas is going to have to ask. But I think that if what I have seen, and again, one of the things that this workshop has affirmed is that the world is interested in this project. The world has not given up on the Palestinian people. Quite to the contrary, hearing from Mohammed last night when he said, he was here representing the Palestinian people, and that if there ever was a governance structure that was created, he thinks the entire Arabic world would rush in to try to help the Palestinian people and do development. So the potential is very, very robust. I think it's really about the leadership making a choice to change their business plan, because what they've chosen for the last 12 years really hasn't worked.
6 years since that discussion, Blair is said to be part of a colonial-esque governing authority in Gaza. But even before Trump's plan comes to fruition, there is strong opposition to Blair's involvement.
Oh, I don't think the Palestinians trust him at all. I think they view him as a colossal failure during the time that he was the quartet envoy. And they're extremely worried about it. If you look at the reactions both in the West Bank and in Gaza today in the streets, they've been very negative. There's tremendous anxiety about not just him, but just about the whole likelihood that this plan will end up in a viable Palestinian state. There was no mention of the West Bank in the plan. President Trump didn't say he was going to lead the effort, but that's the impression all of us have gotten, and that's what we were told before the White House announcement. So he's certainly going to be more than a member of the Board of Peace. He's been slated to have a lead role, and I think that's potentially very problematic. I mean, he has very close business ties in the Gulf. And he's actually in charge, or the Board of Peace is actually in charge of the funds and the reconstruction. If not so, I think, what has Blair got to do with reconstruction? It's not really his main area of expertise.
The other stakeholder in the nearly 2-year-long Gaza war, Hamas, has expressed its dissatisfaction. A senior Hamas leader called Blair the devil's brother. Not just Hamas, even local Palestinians have rejected any possibility of Blair being involved as the Gazan governor.
I will never leave Gaza, even if offered all the money and temptations. I don't want to leave Gaza, and I won't leave it. As for Tony Blair and Britain wanting to rule Gaza and us as Palestinians, Britain was a mandate power before 1948 and handed us over to Israel on a silver platter, giving them all the land, including the 1948 territories. Today, they want to give them what remains of the land. Neither Tony Blair nor Britain has any right to control a single inch of this land. What their former Prime Minister Balfour did in 1917 by promising them the land of Palestine and giving it to them is enough. Tony Blair's proposed involvement implies that Palestinians cannot manage themselves or their affairs. This man's presence undermines any international recognition of a Palestinian state previously granted at the UN General Assembly. This is part of the scheme. If there's a real solution and end to the war, then the Palestinian people should be left to manage their own affairs, lives, and details. No, we don't welcome this plan. If Palestinians could choose their leadership through free elections, given Israel's democracy claims and America's championed democracy, we too are a democratic people. Even if a woman from the Palestinian people is elected by the people, that embodies freedom and independence. The American plan isn't based on any Palestinian rights whatsoever, not on withdrawal, freedom, or even basic rights. Regarding responses, Hamas shouldn't respond negatively, but must consider the reality in Gaza and the citizen situation. The situation in Gaza is very difficult from north to south. Regarding the plan, I support stopping the war and don't oppose it, but the proposal feels like a threat. Some items need clarification. I expect Hamas to reject them. We want terms acceptable to both sides, but the truth is everyone wants the war to stop. Tony Blair was a man of war in Iraq. He's the one who started the war in Iraq with American support. So what should we expect from him? What do we expect from him regarding the Gaza Strip? Either war or business. Trump or Kushner. U.S. President Donald Trump, Trump's first-term Middle East advisor, Jared Kushner, former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are among the biggest problems in the world, and they are not peacemakers. Rather, they look at the Palestinian cause as if it is a business issue and of personal benefit to them. Tony Blair's record with the Palestinians is deeply tainted. He is not neutral. He is completely aligned with what Israel and the United States want. He is also a war criminal for his role in the war against Iraq. He should be in the defendant's box in court, facing trial, not acting as a de facto president or the High Commissioner Gaza for an indefinite period.
Before the Blair-Kushner plan took center stage in Trump's quest to be the peacemaker, Gaza's neighbors had proposed a plan. In March 2025, Arab and Muslim leaders proposed a post-war plan for Gaza. The Egyptian proposal envisioned a technocratic Palestinian interim government that would eventually pave the way for a democratically elected Palestinian government. The proposal gave the reins of Gaza back to the Palestinians to design, lead, and implement. However, months passed and the state of Gaza worsened. Trump's 20-point peace plan gained traction. It remains to be seen if Trump and his fellow mediators in Qatar and Egypt will finally manage to get Israel and Hamas on the same page for Gaza. If they do, Sir Tony Blair's name will perhaps be etched into Gazan history.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले.
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that we will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the U.S. will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry guards.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HT videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.